I want to start today with genuinely just very good news. You might remember that last week on Monday, we learned that Pfizer reported that their vaccine in their data is shown to be 90% effective at preventing coronavirus infections. It was not yet peer reviewed. This morning, just hours ago, Moderna, based here in Boston, says that its vaccine is 94.5% effective in preventing COVID-19. This is interim data from a late stage clinical trial, data on which they will be seeking immediate emergency use authorization to start vaccinating people. And we are very quickly pointed in the direction, of course, pending those approvals, of the U.S. having 2 vaccines authorized for emergency use by December, with as many as 40 to 60 million doses available and being distributed by the end of this year. Moderna's interim analysis was based on 95 infections among participants who received either the placebo or a vaccine. Of those 95 people who got the virus, only 5 had received the vaccine. The other 90 had received a placebo. In other words, not the vaccine. This was with the 2 doses 28 days apart, as is expected to be the sort of eventual protocol for this vaccine. Also very important, the data from Moderna's 30,000 participant trial showed that the people who got the vaccine and got coronavirus, in other words, that roughly 5% who, despite having the vaccine, were not completely protected, seemed to have significantly less serious cases of coronavirus. So that's a question that's still in the air about the Pfizer vaccine. One of the other major differences between the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine is that, unlike the Pfizer vaccine, the Moderna vaccine requires only standard refrigeration. One of the issues with the Pfizer vaccine was that it requires refrigeration well below the temperatures that like a typical flu vaccine might require. And so from an infrastructure standpoint, the Moderna vaccine also having huge promise, just as far as the ease of distribution, and it simplifies infrastructure requirements dramatically. The Pfizer vaccine has to be shipped and stored at minus 70 Celsius, and that's certainly a challenge. So you couldn't ask for better news. Of course, we need to go through the process, peer reviewing the data, getting that emergency use authorization. If you don't trust the FDA, these are we now have 2 vaccines that are going to be presumably seeking approval in other countries as well. So if you trust a different country's health agency, as you would not be crazy to do during a time when the FDA and CDC have been so politicized by the Trump administration, you will have presumably approvals from other countries as well, at least before the vaccine is widely available to people of all ages. And I think it makes sense to mention, it does not seem like these companies, and from what I've seen, the Moderna CEO, to me, has always seemed like a guy on the up and up. The development in Germany with BioNTech and this Turkish immigrant couple of what is now being called the Pfizer vaccine. So far, the point I'm trying to make is I've not seen evidence that either of these individuals are running organizations that would try to get approval for their vaccine before it was ready. Trump wanted them to do it as quickly as possible. Trump said 100 million doses in October. And I would have been worried if that had happened because it seemed like it would have been too soon. December, based on the data we now have, seems logical. And that's sort of where my head is right now. Now, I want to mention one other thing. You start doing the math. Okay, if we have 2 vaccines, 60 million doses in December, you need 2 doses. So that would be like for 30 million people. That's only 10%, 9% of the country. And then maybe you get another total for 35 million people in January. If you start doing math, and it seems like it's going to be a long time before any of us will be able to get a vaccine. The latest surveys indicate that 40% of the country doesn't have any plan to get this vaccine. Now, that represents potential herd immunity issues. But separately, remember, if 40% of the country doesn't want the vaccine, 400 million doses would be enough for everybody who wants the vaccine to get both doses that they need 28 days apart. So the point is, it's bad that 40% of the country doesn't want the vaccine from a herd immunity standpoint. You and I, if you are in sort of my demographic sort of position, age and health range, you and I may be able to get a vaccine far sooner as a result of having hopefully 2 approved vaccines and 40% of the country not wanting it. It does raise longer term questions, though, about 40% of the country not wanting the vaccine. We have a possible game changer here. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've seen Fauci on vaccine timeline be more optimistic lately than we've ever seen him. And if things go the way they are pointing, we could have a second half of 2021 that looks dramatically better than 2020. I don't want to make any more hyperbolic claim than that. I'm not even thinking of things like completely back to normal. But in the meantime, masks, distancing, not having huge indoor Thanksgivings, all of those things have to continue because we're back up to 1,500 people a day dying. If you love feeding your intellectual curiosity, but you're always struggling to find the time, check out one of my all-time favorite apps called Blinkist. Blinkist lets you consume an entire book on your way home from work. They take thousands of popular nonfiction books, condense each one into text or audio that you can get through in just 15 minutes, and you get all of the important core ideas and information from that book. It's perfect if you don't have enough time to do all the reading you want to do, or if you just want to sample a book before you buy the entire thing. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.